So next up, the CCP limits gaming to 3 hours. Boy, can you imagine if you did that in the United States? So that's the Communist Party, the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, has said to everyone in China, you can only play games, online games, gaming. You can only do that for 3 hours a week. That is the edict, the decree coming out of Beijing. So Reuters says in Shanghai, China has forbidden anyone under 18 from playing video games for more than 3 hours a week, a stringent social intervention that is said to, it was needed to pull the plug on a growing addiction to what it once described as spiritual opium. The new rules, published on Monday, are part of a major shift by Beijing to strengthen control over its society and key sectors of its economy, including tech, education, and property, after years of runaway growth. The restrictions, which apply to any devices, including phones, so you can't even use your phone, right, for more than 3 hours, are a body blow to a global gaming industry that caters to tens of millions of young players in the world's most lucrative gaming market. They limit under 18 people who are under 18, from playing for more than 1 hour a day between 8 to 9 p.m. So it's not that you can just play 1 hour a day on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. So just those 3 days, you're limited to just those 3 days to play. And the playtime can only be between 8 and 9 p.m. So that way, the Chinese surveillance state will know if you're playing at 6 p.m. or 5 p.m. They'll know right away, because typically many people play on their phones, these games. Sometimes, obviously, they have gaming consoles and laptops and everything in between. But you're being monitored by the state about not having the ability to be able to play games for more than 3 hours a week, and then you're being told exactly when you can play them. It's true, man. It's completely true. So in the Wall Street Journal, same story. China limits online video games to 3 hours a week for young people. The new regulation will ban minors from playing video games entirely between Monday and Thursday. So Monday to Thursday, you better not be playing games. By the way, it doesn't say what the consequence is if you play more games. Like, what's the consequence? Will you get a lower social credit score? China has a new rule for the country's hundreds of millions of young gamers. No online video games during the school week and 1 hour a day on Fridays, weekends, and public holidays. So rather than just reading this Wall Street Journal article, which is very similar to the Reuters article, you should know this. If you try to do anything like this in the United States, can you imagine young people? I mean, the Biden administration, right now, they're engaged in these bans on social media, people like Alex Berenson, whom they banned. And clearly it's coordination between the Biden administration and big tech, and probably, I personally think, probably the CIA and the NSA and others who really, I believe for quite some time, are in very tight control of this country and are engaging in a massive surveillance state, not unlike what they're doing in China with the limiting of gaming hours for children. And so how is what the CCP is doing, limiting your ability to be able to play games for only 3 hours, any different than saying you need a vaccine passport in order to work? Let me see your papers. We must see your papers before you can work. You cannot come in this restaurant unless you can't come into the plane. You can't do anything. In fact, in New York, the U.S. Open in New York State, that was actually, I think the U.S. Open is in Long Island, But the U.S. Open, which is on Long Island, the tennis, the famous U.S. Open tennis playing, they actually required you to show proof of vaccine before you could enter. And it was a disaster. So how's that any different than what's happening in China? And this is what I think really bugs Americans right now, because it's okay for us to disagree over whether or not this vaccine is the best choice for us, especially if you've already had COVID. And rather than even going into the whole science of this matter, and which is which is unnecessary at this point. It's unnecessary because the information is already out there. There's plenty of information out there for you to make your own decision. And the idea that a government would say you can't work unless you have papers. You can't see the U.S. Open unless you have papers. But we do not allow you to ask that question when you're voting, right? So you could literally have a couple 100,000 Afghanis voting in the next election. Hey, we don't need to see your papers for voting. It's not necessary. And by the way, are they going to be vaccinated? I mean, we've talked about this many times before, just like all the people crossing the border, right? We know they're probably not vaccinated. And naturally, the next thing that happens is they're going to probably start voting. And that's exactly what the Democrats want. They want to remake the country by flooding it with people who, for the most part, may or may not share our values, and many of whom, not all, but many of whom may be coming here for the wrong reasons.